You sound like a destroyed robot.
It's semi-wacky.
Hello and welcome to the Hackaday Podcast. I'm Elliot Williams.
And I'm Kristina Panos.
This is episode 252. X1Plus hacks Bambu. Scotto builds a Katana keyboard. And Bass puts out fire. In news this week, CES is going on. And we wrote up a story about it so far.
AI pet door rejects dead mice.
Which uses computer vision to see if your cat is bringing, well, dead prey in. Only the most important. Do you have a cat?
I do. I have two, but they don't go outside.
Oh, okay.
We live on a busy street, and we just don't want them to go outside, because cats don't live as long if you let them go outside, as is my understanding. And one of them is 18, 19 years old at this point, so...
She's not bringing home any mice?
No. She doesn't hardly play at all.
Yeah, that's pretty old in cat years.
Yeah, it is.
Well, I was just reading an Engadget post about CES because they cover usually the most absurd things. And the top of the list of the most absurd things is an electric bicycle with integrated Chat GPT. Apparently, so you can say, hey, turn on my integrated radio or tell me how to get to the 7-Eleven. Let's see, things that look cool. There's one that's it's called Clicks. It's a case for an iPhone that has an integrated normal, looks like a BlackBerry keyboard almost, that plugs your phone into it. That actually, I think, is genius. I assume it's clicky enough for you.
Well, I mean, I'd have to try it to be sure, but it looks decently clicky.
There's a ton of VR, AR things being shown off.
Ooh, moonwalkers.
Mm-hmm.
Shoes with built-in wheels that speed up your human walking, your very human walking.
Until you go over a crack that's a little bit too big.
What else do we have?
I don't know. A lot of this tech is so absurd, and they really seem to cast their net wide on electronics. I mean, they have, silly wireless earphones, and then they have Honda's new proposed electronic vehicle concepts, and then they have vacuum cleaners. What? I guess they all have electricity in them, and that's the E in electronics, right? So I guess they do. I guess they're all consumer electronics in some sense, but yeah, some of these things are not like the others.
Oh well.
I think Tom was saying something about some cool transparent OLED displays. They're basically doing the same thing they do on monitors, which is, to have that thin sheet with a bunch of whatever it is, indium oxide or something, that transparent metal stuff on it that makes up the grid of your normal OLED or LCD displays, except these are freestanding and no backlight, and so you can see through them. And those look pretty cool. I have no idea what they're good for. I don't think when I'm looking at the display, I want the distracting thing in the background. But there must be an application, maybe like a heads-up display in a car or something like that, where you actually want to kind of see through the display. I remember back when computer desktops finally got transparency as an effect in a terminal window, and I was like, oh, it looks so rad and futuristic. And then I did it, and I'm like, oh, now I can't read anything because my background screen distracts me from it all.
Oh.
Yeah, I would have to move the screen because anyway. Tons of goofy stuff. I think you should all go check it out. I think if past CESs are anything to go by, about, a tenth of this stuff ends up on the market eventually. And of that, about half of it is even halfway sensible. It's always good to see what people are putting out there. Those of you who are big CES fans are screaming at your screen right now. Let us know what the cool things are. In cooler space news, there was a neat study that came out that took a second look at the images from Voyager, I guess it was Voyager 2, that we got of Neptune and Uranus. If you think about the planets, and I was doing this just last week, Uranus is kind of this, cyany green, and Neptune is this awesome blue color, right? It's this dark cobalty blue. And the problem is that it looks like the images of Neptune were actually kind of artificially color adjusted and are made too blue. And we've been seeing these images all the time because they show off this nice storm that's going on it with the extra contrast. But the basic facts are that Uranus and Neptune are made out of the kind of same stuff. And so Professor Patrick Irwin of the University of Oxford's Department of Physics went and looked at these photos and was like, hey, wait a minute, this one's too blue, and readjusted the colors. Yeah, it looks like they're the same color after all. So sorry about that. Now, if you look at Uranus and Neptune in a lineup, you have no way of telling them apart. Like they're both kind of fuzzy and, a nice shade of blue-green, kind of a robin's egg.
Ooh.
He says it's all the methane.
PU.
Yeah, the joke about methane and Uranus. I'm not making it. I'm too much of a grown-up. Yep. Oh, so let's go do a What's That Sound?
Okay.
I've got a really cool sound for you this week.
Okay, here we go. Well, that's a lot of sounds.
What if I told you that's one sound?
Okay.
Yeah, actually.
Because what else could do that?
Well, very good.
Thank you.
Wow, good guess.
Thank you. I will take a large, please. I like my shirts billowy.
Well, congratulations, Kristina, and the rest of you. Head on over to hackaday.com/podcast, fill out the form, put in your best guess, and next week we'll draw from among the right answers. Somebody's going to get a Hackaday Podcast t-shirt. Could be you.
Ooh.
All right, well, my first hack this week is a 3D printer firmware hack. X1Plus open source project brings open source firmware to the Bambu Lab X1. And this is a video from Teaching Tech. The Bambu Labs printers have kind of, I don't know. I mean, I don't have one. I've never tried one out. But from all reports, they've kind of created a very successful turnkey 3D printer that basically puts out good-looking parts and requires very little participation from the user. So like, if you just want a printer that prints, they're expensive, but they kind of get the job done, right? The one real sticking point for a lot of people is that they use an entirely proprietary tool chain. So it looks like it's kind of some version of Clipper. There's a Linux computer on board that does a lot of the driving stuff, but nobody knows in particular what it's doing. And there were rumors that maybe they were sending data home or doing too much logging or, who knows what. And it's all closed source and we can't hack on it. And a lot of 3D printer enthusiasts kind of enjoy the ability to mess around with the firmware, tweak it, add new features, et cetera, et cetera. And frankly, I think the community-supported 3D printers are significantly stronger for it. But that hasn't been the case with Bambu Labs. They run a proprietary firmware until the X1Plus team found essentially a jailbreak for the 3D printer and wrote their own firmware for it. It's going to be open sourced. It hasn't been released yet for actually, I don't know what reason, but the team wanted to reach out to Bambu Labs and get in touch with them. And so they did this by enlisting a couple YouTubers, one of them, Michael from Teaching Tech, who talks about the firmware in this video. And it's really neat. It looks like totally first steps, and it's been a small project and a secret project because they didn't want Bambu Labs to catch on too early and patch the hole that allows them to jailbreak the printers and install this firmware. Indeed, that's what Bambu Labs has done already. So if you are on version 1.7.0, you can jailbreak it. And if you're on version 1.7.1, they have prevented you from jailbreaking it all of a sudden. So if you think you're interested in this, don't upgrade your firmware just yet. Interesting things you can do. This printer has a number of hardware features that might be fun to play around with. It's got an onboard camera and it does first layer LiDAR scanning, and none of these features are open to the end user, and that's one of the things the X1Plus team is targeting. They've improved a lot of the ways it does the diagnostics for like the board leveling and for some of the anti-vibration features. They've added an SSH capability to it. Basically, it's they're just starting to play around with what you can do for the firmware until Bambu Labs shut them down. In a very recent twist, and this was in the comments by Mace GR, hey Garrett, he said that you should go check out the Bambu Labs blog. I did. They are kind of releasing a version of 1.7.0 that will let you choose whether you want to run the community firmware or the official firmware. But if you choose to run the community firmware, it voids your warranty. And so, they don't want to support it, which I guess makes total sense. Michael from Teaching Tech thinks that a lot of the new features are worth it, and even just having a community version of the firmware for this device will help Bambu Labs. I mean, they use a ton of open source software that goes along with their particular closed source secret sauce in the printer, and they gain a lot from the open source community in all other ways, and I don't see any reason that this wouldn't be the same. It looks like Bambu Labs is not going to kind of embrace the open source community. They're really going to freeze it at this one version. After this, it's up to you. So it's not clear that this is really... It's not clear to me that they really are, getting down with the program here. I think they kind of were forced to do something like this by the existence of a jailbreak, and they're kind of coping along with it. And then to some extent, I guess if you're using one of these printers, you may not be one of the serious, hack my printer types anyway. This is a printer that's meant to be just a get it done printer, not a you want to tweak with it printer. So I think some other people in the comments said, look, if you want a printer that you can tweak, just get an open source printer and do it that way. And I think that's probably actually the right choice. If you got a Bambu Labs and you want to start pushing it in interesting directions, I think this is super interesting. And I do agree with Michael that innovations on the open source firmware will probably eventually make it over to the Bambu Labs official firmware. And so ironically, this is going to help them out in the long run, even though they're fighting tooth and nail against it. You got a 3D printer?
I'm married to someone who has 3D printers. I don't consider them mine, really.
Very good.
I mean, they're, of course, open for me to use, but I still want to get mine. I want to get my own.
Oh, very good.
I still don't know what to get, but I'll get one someday.
Yeah.
Probably. I'll probably end up with one that just goes at first.
That's probably the right way to go anyway.
So, yeah.
But there's a whole range of ones that just go these days.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. So that's good for me.
I think the Bambu Labs X1s are like $1,000.
Ooh.
I could check that. I probably should check that. I think they cost a little bit more than I'm willing to spend on a printer unless it's like an absolutely deluxo printer.
Yeah, that's a lot of Lego.
That's a lot of Legos.
Even if you buy that Hobbit house. Sorry. There's this Hobbit house. It's like $700. It's beautiful, but it's huge.
Legos are ridiculous.
They have good tolerance though.
Oh, dude, it's unbelievable. What do they want for this thing? Blah, blah, blah. Give me a bottom line. How much does this thing cost, you people? You know it's bad news when they don't tell you what the price is.
If you have to ask.
It's $1,500.
Hmm.
Yeah, okay. Well, screw that. Too expensive.
Well, my first hack is a keyboard. Surprise.
Yoo-hoo!
Yoo-hoo. It's a pretty cool one. It's the latest from Joe Scotto. I assume that we say Joe Scotto and not Scotto. Please, if you know, tell us in the comments. The Scotto Katana keyboard is cutting edge. He has entered his Katana phase, and the Katana is a keyboard created by Roman Ronin. And the interesting thing about it is the staggered layout is like symmetric. So the right side, if you look at if you have a regular QWERTY rectangle keyboard and you look at it, and the right side is staggered, so if you were to take a mirror image of that and apply it to the left side, that's what's going on here. So that's pretty cool. As for that layout, I have no idea what that is. I tried to look that up. I don't know what it is. It's probably a...
I didn't even notice that. I was just looking at the strange keyboard, but it's QWFPG.
Yeah.
And then the home row on the left hand is ARSTD. Oh man, none for me, thanks.
But the ZXCVB is the same.
Right?
So there's that.
K is where N should be. E is where K should be. Oh dear. Oh dear.
Lots of stuff going on here. But Joe says it's the best one, the best sounding keyboard he's made so far. It has lubed Gatoron Milky Yellows in it. And like all his other builds, it's beautifully hand-wired. So far there's been no typing test, but actually I need to check the site again, because there might be one by now.
This thing is entirely 3D printed, isn't it?
Yes.
Like he printed the keycaps and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Printed the frame, printed the keycaps, little bit of hand wiring and you're done.
Yeah.
Damn. Well, all right.
Have at it.
Yeah, right? I like the idea of the symmetric staggering because you hold your hands at an angle anyway when you type, right? What is that called? The tilt in.
Oh, the board.
Because your elbows are at the side of your body, if you pull your hands together, right, it makes that angle. And whatever that angle is, this kind of mimics that a little bit. So it kind of looks like one of those, it's like the split keyboard with the angled in, whatever it is, the yaw angle. Whatever that angling is, this kind of does that, but through the symmetric staggering. And I think that's probably some kind of stealth ergonomic benefit.
I hope so.
Plus, it's sweet looking.
Yeah.
It doesn't have nearly enough keys.
No, I'm with you there. 33 is not enough for me.
Is that a keyboard nerd bumper sticker?
It should be. I'll make it one. It's like I can't drive 55, but for keyboards.
Is this, people in the comments are mentioning Colmac? Is this the Colmac layout?
Maybe it is. Well, the QWERTY dinosaur learned something today. I've definitely heard of it, but I've never studied it, so...
Yeah, now I think we're looking at it. It looks like it makes a ton of sense. Like, the most used keys are all on the home row.
Yeah.
No stretching for I or O anymore. Well, I kind of buy it. I'm not going to learn to retype on a different keyboard layout.
All you have to do is learn a new layout.
None for me, thanks, but I do know people who will do it, so...
Bully for them.
Exactly. They're stronger people than I am. Well, my next hack is 1D fireworks are nice and quiet. This is a super simple little hack. It's basically one of those strips of WS2812 LEDs and an ESP8266 board and a switch to fire it off. What's really pretty here, though, is the rocket effect and then the explosion effect work extremely well, given that it's a 1D animation on a strip. And I had to go check it out. Daniel Westhoff here based the code on code he got from Carl Rosendahl. You can find both versions of that in the linked GitHub and paste bin, respectively. But what's neat about this is that they actually do a limited physics modeling of the fireworks rocket. And it kind of, the flare gets shot up and it gets darker as it goes up, but it also slows down, of course, because, it's running out of propellant. And then it explodes and you get all the random colory sparkles going off in different directions, but they fall just right. And it's really cool if you actually look at the code to figure out how it's done, and I did because it's so darn pretty. They actually have a decay factor on the effective gravity for the sparkles as they get dimmer, because you kind of are imagining, the metal being burnt out of the sparkle and it getting lighter and falling slower because the wind resistance doesn't change, but the weight of the thing does, right? So, as the sparkles fade out, they also fall a tiny little bit slower, and it just makes an absolutely fabulous explosion-y effect. And the Hackaday writer who wrote this up, Kristina Panos, also linked in a bunch of my favorite 1D LED, RGB LED strip games, including Twang, and then the Pong, and then the Wolfenstein one is just absolutely insane. But I really want to mention Twang in particular, which actually comes from a previous game called Line Wobbler. And I just love the idea of coding games and physics simulations and whatever else to fit the kind of absurd constraint of doing it just on an LED strip. And it made me think of a few games. Unfortunately, some of them I've played but haven't ever seen documented anywhere. So if anyone out there listening knows where these come from, I've seen them both in the context of Chaos Computer Club events, so either camp or Congress. And one of them was at camp this summer. Players had a single arcade button each, and your little light dot would go faster through the maze depending on how fast you pressed the arcade button. And so 4 people could play at once and their colors would race along. It was actually really awesome. Also very simple to implement, super cheap to make, but was actually surprisingly fun. I saw a bunch of different versions of Twang slash Line Wobbler slash whatever this kind of 1D dungeon crawler game is, which is really cool. And then one I saw many, many years ago that still haunts my dreams was kind of a roller coaster physics simulation where they just took the LED strip and draped it randomly on the wall, had a web camera that would map where the pixels are physically in space, and then run a roller coaster simulation on light pixels that go across. And so you would log in with your cell phone, actually, pick a color, and launch your little roller coaster, and it would go up and down. But it was an actual physics simulation underlying the whole thing. And so it was really, really, really cool effect. And then speaking of LED roller coasters, there's a phenomenal project that you should absolutely check out if you're at all interested in doing crazy things with LED strips. How to make a model roller coaster without any moving parts. This takes a 3D model of a Jurassic Park roller coaster, the Velocicoaster, and then simulates it in physics and runs little light-colored cars around it. And it's just an absolutely fantastic build, but goes to show what you can do with a little CNC machining and an LED strip. So what do any of these all have in common? You've got an LED strip lying around and a little bit of coding. You can replicate them all yourself. And if anyone's seen a reference for either the button press racer or the roller coaster one, let me know in the comments. Please, please, please.
That roller coaster is beautiful. Dang. Woo. Woo. Well, let's go from the wonder of light to the wonder of magnets.
Oh.
Yeah. It's not the first kinetic sand table that we've seen, and it certainly won't be the last. Remote control kinetic sand table uses a single Arduino, and that wasn't meant to be a clickbait title, promise. It's noteworthy because Nuisance Electronics sort of, what do I want to say, massaged the code to make it fit on a single Arduino. Put it on a weight loss program of sorts. So this one uses an HBot system to move a powerful stack of magnets around beneath the table, which is how these things usually work, to move a ball bearing through sand, to make mesmerizing designs without it looking like anybody's doing anything. And if you don't understand the HBot concept, which I certainly don't, be sure to check out this YouTube video, which I will link in the show notes. I'm not sure how to pronounce the creator's handle. I've always thought of it as TH-ong and then the numbers, but I'm not sure how to say it.
Yeah, these builds, there's something fascinating about them. And if you're into, I don't know, CNC machines or computer art or any of the above, they definitely speak to me. They probably speak to you as much as they speak to me.
I could watch it all day.
I think you'd have to. I don't think they move all that fast.
This one has slow and fast settings.
All right.
It's also remote controlled.
Ooh, and very nicely designed. I'm looking at the video right now, and it looks like it's a bunch of laser cut parts and some linear rails and not much more than that.
That's the truth.
If I had a big house, I would have one of these in it. We don't have the floor space for random pretty things.
Maybe you could make a desktop one.
Yeah. I wonder how small you could make one.
Yeah.
And still have it be interesting to look at. Wonder if you could make one that's like square foot or something.
That's what I was just thinking. A square foot is maybe the smallest you can go.
Yeah.
And have it still be interesting, like you said.
Yeah, let's use a smaller ball. Ooh, I like this. Give me another project I'll never have time to do. All right, my last hack today is a new video from Thomas Sandladerer. This is Thomas Sandladerer Gets New Threads. He's testing out thread inserts in 3D prints. You know, you may think you've seen this covered before, and I certainly have. But here he's kind of taking a different approach to things. He's looking at threads and screws as if he was an engineer. And that is to say, if you're, a serious mechanical engineer, which I am not, but I've heard tell bolts get torqued down to a specific tightness where they won't come loose again because the bolt itself kind of acts a little bit like a spring and holds on tight. And that's kind of the point of bolts in, vibration-y environments like cars. That's why you torque down your lug nuts on your car wheels, so they don't come undone and your car wheels don't fall off. And so he's taking that kind of approach to screwing things together on 3D prints here. and asking if you get the metal to metal connection that you would get if you use those like heat press 3D print inserts, those screw thread inserts. Can you get them to tighten down enough so that you can actually get a little preload on the screws and hold things together against vibration? And the short answer here is no, you can't at all. The plastic always gives out first, basically no matter what he tried to do. And so, wah, wah, a little bit. On the other hand, all of the heatset 3D printed inserts worked pretty well in terms of how much weight they can hold until they gave out. And they worked a little bit better in his tests than did trying to 3D print just a straight hole and then tap it. What I thought was interesting in his experiments is he also tried to 3D print the screw pattern, the screw thread pattern itself into the 3D printed holes without using inserts. And that actually worked fairly well. He got that to work better than I've ever gotten it to work. Now, I guess I don't look at screws like an engineer. I kind of look at these things and I'm like, well, how hard can I pull on it before it fails? And in that perspective, I've never had problems just 3D printing a straight cylinder hole and then screwing the screw into it, kind of maybe making it like a self-tapping thread or something. And that's never given me any problems. And in contrast to this video, there's another one that we ran just recently, back in November, putting 3D printed screw threads to the test, where another YouTuber tests how hard he can pull on 1/4-inch bolts and ends up pulling, depending on how much infill he uses, between 50 and 100 pounds, which he concludes is more than enough for his super expensive but only 20-pound camera rig. And so he's willing to put a multi-$1,000 camera rig on simple 3D printed screws. In my anecdotal experience, it works out just fine too. For most lightweight applications, you don't even need the thread inserts. Although what they do bring to the table is that you can screw and unscrew the thing a lot without risking damaging the thin plastic threads. So that's probably useful if you plan to open and close a box a lot, for instance. You probably want to put threaded inserts in there. But if you're just screwing it together once and hoping it holds, go ahead and 3D print your screws straight on in. No metal involved.
For my last hack, I chose using sound waves as a fire extinguisher. No, really. This will work on a small scale with, say, your phone speaker and a birthday candle or a lighter flame. And there are apps that will do this. It shows a little fan, and it, sure enough, blows out flames using your speaker, using sound waves as a fire extinguisher. Basically, the sound waves blow the flame out, but in a different way by wiggling it out. And this works on a larger scale with larger speakers, asterisk. So the Action Lab simulates a kitchen fire using alcohol in a saucepan and tries to blow it out with a 70 Hz sound wave coming out of a very large speaker, which, spoiler alert, didn't work until he turned it around to expose instead the bass reflex port and attached an air vortex cannon to concentrate and move the air coming off the speaker. And then it worked pretty darn well.
Huh.
And he goes and measures the airflow coming off the speaker, well, coming off of the bass reflex port, both with and without the air vortex cannon. And the difference compared to a fan is, negligible. And he tries it with a big box fan too, and it just fans the flames, basically. It just kind of moves it around.
So what? It's something about the frequency of the waves that put it out? I don't fully understand this yet.
That's my basic understanding. Yeah.
He's playing, like you said, he's playing bass notes at the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh God, I'm watching him do the fan demo. That seems like a really dumb thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah. That was hard to watch.
That's lovely, but so it does seem to be blowing a little bit, but it really relies on the back and forthiness of it, the AC component of it, to keep the flame exposed to areas of air that have already been kind of burnt through already, that have already gotten a lot of the oxygen used up. That's really wild. I'm surprised he didn't experiment around with a whole bunch of different frequencies in this thing.
Yeah.
Huh, I would.
I know you would.
Ray writes in that he played Steppenwolf's Born to Be Wild and blew out candle flames at 12.5 inches. I don't know that Born to Be Wild is necessary, but that's pretty good.
Heavy Metal Thunder.
All right, my first quick hack today comes from Calvin Vankede. This is how to build a fully online smart home or why you should not. Basically, this is a write up of his venture into a non connected smart home using the Home Assistant software and Zigbee. And he claims that that's the path of least resistance. And it probably is, as long as you don't need to control your home from outside your home. Probably provides you maximum security, simplicity, and ease of setup. So, really cool guide. Next up, Jan Goslicki, aka Quad Worker. This is a talk from 37C3, The Tech Behind Life with Quadriplegia. He is paralyzed in his arms and legs and talks about all of the tech things that make his life easier. And it's surprising, a lot of it actually, it starts off with the kind of pedestrian home automation stuff, which if you're constrained to a wheelchair, it's really nice to be able to turn on your lights by yourself. But it also extends to voice recognition, and he has a dot on his forehead that he can use with some vision recognition software to control a mouse, and he can control computers this way. He was a tech company founder beforehand and still goes to work, albeit remotely. And all of this is kind of made possible by a bunch of different technologies, which he lays out for us in this talk. It's just a really neat perspective, from the user side of things on what parts of this assistive tech are good and bad and useful for him. I thought it was a really great talk. And last up, Aaron Christoffel, half power bank, half spot welder. This is a review and teardown of one of the cheapo spot welders. I bought one that looks superficially similar to his, but works a lot better, and I haven't torn it apart to see if it's the same. We paid different amounts of money. He kind of concludes it's kind of minimally successful. Mine's an absolute beauty. I wish I could say what was different between them, but they are both in the same kind of aluminum extruded case. His has a color screen, mine doesn't. How do you know what you're getting when you buy one of these things? I have no idea. Russian roulette, Alibaba style.
For my first quick hack, I chose there are Stradivarius ways to make a violin, and this is one. So this is a very cool 3D printed electric violin that very much resembles a headless guitar in the way that it's shaped, in the way that it's formed, with the tuning pegs down by where you bow instead of up at the head. It even has a truss rod of sorts running through it, but that may just be to keep the three-part construction together. My next quick hack is sandpaper alternatives for 3D prints. Sandpaper is not always the best option or the greatest option if you have something really huge that you need to smooth. So here are some other additive methods, including one called 3D gloop. The other ones they mention are spray fill and epoxy coating. 3D gloop seems particularly nice, but it also comes with a number of safety concerns, so watch out for that. And for my last quick hack, I chose Not Dead Yet. Microsoft peripherals get licensed to Onward Brands. So this comes to us from InCase/Onward Brands. And I reported in a Keybin not too long ago that Microsoft was going to discontinue making peripherals. But InCase/Onward Brands has picked up the torch. So let us know what your favorite Microsoft peripheral was in the comments. Mine, of course, is the natural keyboard, the original natural keyboard, except no substitutes.
All right, well, that brings us to our Can't Miss articles. These are long-form pieces written by our fantastic Hackaday writing staff. I'm looking down at our spreadsheet, and we've got a twofer from Jenny List this week. So double rants, double barrel rants from Jenny List this week. So I'll start off with the world of web browsers is in a bad way. And here she is looking at the browser landscape from kind of a historical perspective, I guess, a little bit, and saying, oh boy, we are getting back into a world with only one browser again, and this has not been good for internet infrastructure in the past. So she starts off the story in the mid-90s when the web was absolutely brand new and Internet Explorer came on the scenes, and then there was Netscape Navigator as the open source alternative to that. And these two were in mortal combat with each other. In particular, Microsoft's strategy was the now infamous embrace, extend, and extinguish strategy, which was to use Internet Explorer and new features in Internet Explorer to make the web landscape change enough underneath it that they could then push Netscape out of the competition. And so they were trying to put out all sorts of crazy non-standard browser extensions to beat out Netscape. What happened in the end, actually, is that Internet Explorer won for a little while, and then Apple's Safari browser came out of nowhere. And for a while, there was kind of almost parity between Netscape, which then became Phoenix, which then became Firebird, which then became Firefox, and Apple's Safari. And so in kind of the early 2000s, there was this kind of almost equal, comparable three-way footing between the three browsers. And this was just unstable enough that it forced the web community to say, hey, we need to unify things and get back to single web standards. So what was nice here is that having two competitors kind of diffused the Microsoft strategy of adding on tons of incompatible options to, this web page renders only in Internet Explorer type things. And that's where this story gets ugly. And Jenny's conclusion is that these days, everybody's moved over to, well, first of all, Google Chrome is absolutely the dominant browser, and it uses the old WebKit engine from Apple's Safari browser. I mean, they forked it, they call it Blink, but it's basically the same thing. So Chrome and all the Chromium-based browsers use the same kind of web engine. Microsoft's Internet Explorer became Edge, and it uses Chromium as well. So we're really kind of in a monoculture almost. Firefox, I guess, still exists. They have their own browser renderer called Gecko, but I think Firefox has a tiny market share these days. And so basically, we're in a monoculture ecosystem again. And this can't be good for development of things on the web. And I use both Firefox and Chromium-based browser, and I won't lie, I run into websites that won't render in Firefox. We're running into friggin' web compatibility issues again, like it's 2003, and I think this has something to do with Chromium's absolute dominance in the market. And so people who make web pages are only checking them out on one browser, only on essentially WebKit-based browsers, and not making sure that they run with others, which means they're writing non-standard compliant web code. And it's like it was 20 years ago again, and it was a horrible, horrible time. And I fear Jenny's right that we're heading back toward that. And I think the answer, and she hints at this, is, certainly try to use alternative browsers if you can. She says that Firefox may not be enough, and that she thinks there needs to be yet a third browser engine in competition. Ugh. Can I agree with that? I don't know. I mean, I think Firefox is kind of on life support as it is and needs all the help it can get. I think moving off to another browser, and I guess your choice here is the Pale Moon / Basilisk browsers, which use the Goanna engine, which is, to be fair, a fork of Mozilla's Gecko, but at least it's kind of a third option, at least in principle. I mean, I think the other side of this coin is that what does it matter if there's only one web rendering engine as long as it's open source and everyone can use it? And I think that's partly true. On the other hand, in this case, it's so tied to respectively Apple and Google that it's open source, but they kind of run the scene. Can you remember the 2000s web?
Yeah, a little bit.
When chaos ruled? You were probably Internet Explorer, huh?
Yeah. Well, I used Netscape a little bit.
Yeah?
The first thing I had was Juno, so I had email only at first. Yeah. Dial up, get the email.
Right, right. I was a little bit interested in web tech back in the day, and so I heard a lot of the web developers complaining about the different browsers. I don't know, have you ever done any web coding where you need to write all this conditional code where it's like, if you're using this browser, render this way, put this in this box. If you're in this browser, put this in this box.
No.
Oh, dude, there were all these crazy ways you could test to figure out what browsers people were using, and they were all based on bugs. So it was like Internet Explorer would render something. It would like automatically assume that you would close list element tags. So there was some hacky workaround where you could leave dangling list element tags open and then embed scripts in that were meant to work on Safari but not Internet Explorer and stuff. I mean, there were all these horrible, horrible shims back in the day. Oh God, bad times. So maybe in comparison to that, the monoculture is a good thing. Who knows? But
Maybe.
I'm scared to give too much control of the internet to Google. I mean, we
Yeah.
kind of already do.
Yeah.
Who are we kidding?
What are you gonna do?
Rise up and create better technology and take back the freaking internet?
Okay.
I mean, that's what I'm going to do. Not personally.
But you're behind the initiative.
But I'll give anyone money who wants to do that.
Oh, okay.
I actually use a totally weird fringe browser, Qt browser it's called. It's actually written in Python, but it's part of the damn monoculture. It uses the WebKit rendering engine. So even I am part of the problem, I think. The good news, at least, is that a lot of Chromium's weird extensions don't work on my browser. So I actually have to go open them up in Chrome to make things work sometimes. I guess that's good. Why did that sound so bad?
Well, for my can't miss, I chose Jenny's rant about a few rules for the responsible use of new technology. Now, Jenny is tired of certain things about new technology and offers a 4-point plan for responsible use. And the 4 points are basically, don't use it to shorten the lifespan of a product. And she points at AirPods and lithium-ion and lithium polymer batteries that are sealed and irreplaceable. Number 2, don't use it as an excuse to inhibit reparability. So she points at John Deere, but she also points at the automotive industry. The third point is don't tie it to unnecessary services. Now, Jenny cites her washing machine. I have to say, I love my washer and dryer. They're completely mechanical. They're speed queens, which are what you would find in like a laundromat. They're commercial.
Heck
They
yeah.
were not easy to get, and they weren't hard to get, but they weren't like, you can't just go into Best Buy or whatever and get speed queens. But yeah, we've had them for almost 10 years now, and they're doing great, which that's not that long, but I guess it's doing pretty good in this day and age
Yeah, right?
to last that long.
Do you have to put in quarters?
No, but that would be cool.
That would be awesome.
Jenny's fourth point is that new technology should not be detrimental to the planet, which in a way calls back to number 1 and the whole battery thing. More specifically, she cites power-hungry cryptocurrency mining and generative AI, things that use more power than Argentina. And of course, there's an in-link for that. So I have to say I definitely agree with all of Jenny's points. I don't disagree with any of them, that's for sure. I don't know if I have anything to add to her points, though.
I think she's preaching to the choir here, and we're all
Yeah.
we're all in line with a lot of this. I mean, replaceable batteries, hell yeah. If you have to throw away your AirPods just because they don't recharge anymore, that's lousy,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera.
Or your phone.
Yeah, I was going to say, picking on them is unfair when the entire cell phone industry, whether Apple or Samsung or anybody. So I do fear that a lot of this has to be political action. Some of it, I guess, can be, small scale hacker action as well, though, too. When physical devices are tied to service in the cloud, you man in the middle of the servers and try to figure out how to replicate their functionality in case and / when the service in the cloud goes down. Opening things up and putting new batteries in, some of those devices are really tiny and really fidgety, and the glue's really hard to get open. But look, y'all, hair dryer and/or, small cutting tool, we could find a way.
Creating jobs, surely somebody can do it.
Yeah, I used to live in China for a while, and there are people who are able to do this sort of thing in China. Like, if you think your phone does not have a replaceable battery, you just haven't taken it to the right people in China, because there's going to be a mom and pop shop that will figure out a way to fix it up for you. But yeah, I think it's a great call to action for people who are kind of in the tech creation sector to think about what you're doing if you are making a new thing, and think about whether it's actually helping or hurting, and think about whether, you're making it easy to keep it out of the landfill a year and a half from now when somebody's bought it, right? That's about it for this week's Hackaday Podcast. Thanks very much for listening. If you see anything cool or do anything cool, send us a line, tips@hackaday.com. And if you want to follow the links, they're all in the show notes over at hackaday.com/podcast. And until next week,
Keep on hacking.
and that's it for me.
Quick hacks. You sounded like a destroyed robot during your quick hacks.
How do I sound? Am I coming through okay?
Yeah, you sound good. You're breaking up again.
I think I'm done.
I think it's Scotto. I don't know though.
It is what it is.
It's probably better that way.
Say la vie.
Love you.
Say goodnight, Gracie.